when we talk about sexuality, there's a lot of boundaries. A lot of people just like to talk about normalization and maybe things that they are comfortable about. But in the real world, there is a darker side to sex that's exciting and adventurous. On today's show, we're going to be talking about leather BDSM. Hi, this is Joey Butterfield, and welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking to Kevan Walsh, and he's going to be talking to us about the leather scene in Melbourne and his titles that he's won, and also information to get us all on track with what BDSM is. Kevan, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Joey. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. I love the fact that you made me you didn't make me, but I got this for you. And it's interesting because I think that as a therapist, you sort of have, I think everyone's got this dark side that they'd like to keep hidden because they're afraid. But I'm learning more and more about that because more and more people are getting comfortable. Do you think that's got to do with like social media before we get started? Like, is social media a part of, or the internet is part of people becoming more comfortable?
You can certainly find more things if you can think about it. Someone's put a video of it up on the internet for sure.
Yeah.
And I think also you can see, you can have friends overseas or across the country who you've connected in on one level, and then all of a sudden a picture of them pops up at a kink event or in their, in my formal leathers or whatever at Mardi Gras, and you think, oh, I didn't realize, but he's normal.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, cool. I'm sure we'll go into that deeper. So before we start, can you tell the audience a little bit about you, like about where you're from and what you do and all that sort of stuff before we get into the subject?
Yep, I'm a Melbourne-born native, local. I'm 56. I'm a cis white man, gay. Pronouns are he and him for anyone who's interested, or sir, depending on what the context you're greeting me in is. I've previously been married. I've got 2 adult kids. I came out in my desperately late 30s. I'm a health professional. I'm an occupational therapist by training. I have a partner that I've been with since almost the moment I came out. We've been together 18 years. Lloyd is my rock and has provided me with the anchor from which I go out and come back and go out and come back. And he's allowed me the space to grow and change.
Wow. I mean, I've been interviewing all these people recently who have had long-term relationships, and it's so beautiful to see all these role models in the gay world that, encourages people that relationships are still happening. Because I think there is a misconception that they're not, but they are. So that's really, really good. So that's a starting point, I guess. Do you want to just explain what BDSM is and the difference between what you do and maybe what people may know? And I guess while you're doing that, can you maybe also share with us what was the introduction for you? How did you get into it? Because I always find these stories interesting because it's not as if you were walking in the supermarket and then decided to take that off the shelf. Yeah.
I'll take a packet of floggers today.
Yeah. So what's your connection to it? How did you get there? And can you explain it?
Yeah. Look, as I said, I came out late and I sort of hovered around the edges of the gay community. My partner came out when he was very young. So by the time we got together, he'd been everywhere and done everything. And it was sort of like, oh, I'll take Kevan there. Never begrudgingly, but there was never a point that I actually felt like I fitted in. And I came to leather and BDSM looking for my people, for my tribe, I guess, for want of a better word. I had a couple of loose contacts on the leather scene. There's an app called Recon that aims towards more of the kink fetish sort of side of the gay male community. I met a fella on there who eventually became my master. We talked for about 12 months. We trained for about 12 months after that. And ultimately that relationship became, I was collared to him for a number of years until that finished.
Okay. So I want to ask, so this isn't a question I was going to ask, but you just said something that I find interesting. Because you came out and you were saying that you were looking for your tribe, I mean, how did you know that's where you wanted to go? Do you think that organically an older gay man is drawn towards that scene because there may not be as many opportunities in other scenes. Like I look at myself and I remember I came out young like your partner. And so I went through all the different scenes. And then as I got older, I was more drawn towards this scene.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, do you think that's an organic progression? Because there doesn't seem to be maybe acceptance in the other scenes.
The media representations of BDSM and leather tend to focus on either the really, really young, hyper-masculine Tom of Finland sort of images or daddy.
Yeah.
Daddy, sir, master. So it does seem to be somewhere that we do sort of lots of people gravitate to as they age. I also come to leather from the perspective of leather's just not what I'm wearing. Leather is how I approach the world and how I move myself around my world. So there are a couple of really, well known in the community acronyms that we tend to live by. There's HILT and HARD. So HILT is honour, integrity, loyalty, and trust, and HARD is honesty, accountability, reliability, and duty. And that forms the way that I try and move myself through my world. So that it's a good fit for me from a spiritual, emotional, ethical perspective.
I mean, the one thing that I like about that scene, which I think should be a role model for the other parts of the gay community, is this scene seems to be welcoming to everyone. You know what I mean? There's like people that are young can come in. Well, say if you go to a dance party or something where there's, muscly boys, it may not be as welcoming to someone older. So, I think that it's been a foundation for a long time in the gay world. And I think if the gay world, because I feel the gay world's disconnecting a little bit. And so maybe this is where we need to look back at. So can you explain to us then what it stands for and what it represents and how you see it or interpret it by bringing leather into it?
Yep. So BDSM is practiced throughout, a whole range of different communities. Bondage, discipline, submission, mastery, sadism, masochism. The last couple of letters can have a couple of different meanings depending on what your take on it is. Within the gay community, it's often, I think, much more tied up with leather than it is in the heterosexual or the pan communities. My understanding, and I can only speak from my experience, but my understanding is from within the lesbian community, it can also be a little bit more tied up with leather. In the straight and the pan communities, often less so. So just because someone's wearing leather at the bar doesn't necessarily mean that they're a filthy BDSM pig, although you can live in hope.
Oh, they dream.
But equally, just because they're there in a nice, pressed shirt and a nice pair of slacks doesn't necessarily mean that they're also haven't got some filthy deviancy lurking underneath the surface.
So does that mean that there are some people that use it as a form of drag to express something, and then there are other people that are private and they express it in their privacy of their own home? So so you're saying that you don't really know what you're getting till you get it.
Yeah, there's a guy on the Melbourne leather and rubber scene. He was our first Melbourne rubber title holder, and his thing is often, for lots of people, it's just sexy dress ups.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started, I got a job I remember going to Folsom Street by accident. I think I told you this story, and I didn't know about what that was. I was only in my 20s, and I remember there was a lot of chaos and people, and I went there, and I'm wearing, I'm wearing the most anti-leather clothing ever, and I walked into this party, and I went, I felt like I discovered something. So when I came back to Melbourne, I got a job at the Laird because I wanted to learn more. So it was definitely a drag thing for me because I just wanted to feel that masculine energy. So in regards to what you were saying about the behavior, how do you explain to people when they say to you that BDSM normally comes with a mental health issue? Like when people are into really full-on stuff, how do you, because there's a lot of myths about what the public believe, like you were saying. So how do you navigate that so people can not be scared or they can see that people aren't broken? Because, if someone likes, for example, like to be a dog and tied up, right, which is all part of the fantasy, people sometimes look at that and go, "Oh my god, that person's got lots of damage," right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
So how do you explain it to people?
Look, we're all damaged on some level, aren't we?
Yes.
Because neither you or I'd have a job if everybody wasn't damaged just a little bit.
Yeah.
Look, often the perception is, particularly for the submissives, is that they've missed out on something, or they want to be treated like doormats, or that they're just victims, and for the dominants that they're just
Power hungry
sociopaths and narcissists, and they have no conscience and those sorts of things. What I think people who take that perspective miss out on is, in a real BDSM dynamic, there's such a huge degree of trust that's been developed. The amount of conversation that's gone into having that first scene with someone that you're intending to develop a dynamic with. I might talk to someone for 2 or 3 months. We've talked backwards and forwards about the sorts of things that they like and the sorts of things that they don't like. We talk about what's happened to them in their life. What is it that they think that they can get from BDSM? It's about working out. We've all got bits of damage.
Yeah. Do you? So what you're is it? What you're? So do you think what you're saying is that it doesn't necessarily mean it's about the sex? Because I'm hearing you go. Because I agree. I remember the very first time I experienced this scene was I was expecting sex, right? And when I got there, I just got covered in pegs. Right? I just got covered in pegs, and that was
one of my favourite things.
That was the end of the thing. I'm going, oh, what do I do now? You go home.
Yeah,
you're like, so I really like, for me personally, I really enjoy the role playing language dynamic. The sex part is a bonus. So, so is that true? Is it more than just sex?
Yeah, way more than just sex. Someone is, for a submissive to come, and I play predominantly on the top side. Now I've had my period as a collared slave. I have, and in the older traditions, you would then, you would progress through and you would do your training and you would experience all your things, and then you would graduate and be a dominant. For me, it was slightly different, but I've ended up in that dominant role. And I've completely lost my train of thought where I was going.
That's okay. I can edit that out. So we were talking about it not being about sex only.
No.
So I can cut it there, right, for you, and then let's start it off, and I'll cut it again.
Yeah. So when someone comes for a scene, they're giving you an incredible degree of trust. Sex might or might not be part of that. You might have negotiated that as part of the scene. They might have made it clear that that's what they're expecting, but it doesn't always go that way. And sometimes actually having sex in that scene dilutes the connection that you've created with the person over that 2 or 3 hours that you've been playing.
I think it's got to do, like, before we started the podcast, I was mentioning to you there's a progressive popularity now with porn being, I guess, diluted with this, and there's a lot of fantasy, which is all great. But do you think that there's a lot of people that actually look at that and don't really care about the meaning of it? They just want the feeling, so their sex can be dirtier or more intense, and is that real? I guess when people are friendly and then they're not friendly, I always realize the people that aren't friendly are the ones that aren't really taking it serious.
And the problem with porn within the BDSM community is that porn shows you this little snippet. It doesn't show you all the negotiations that's happened. It doesn't show you the warm up. I did a caning scene at the Laird with one of my boys a couple of years ago, and we went for about 45 minutes. It was probably a little bit long for a demo, but we were having a good time, and that was all that counted. Several people came up to us over the course of the evening and said, "How could you cane him for 45 minutes? I've seen it on porn, and you do whack, 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 and it's all over." So BDSM porn particularly creates this artificial expectation that it's a 2-minute experience,
Yeah.
not a 2-hour job to get to that 2-minute experience.
And there does, I mean, in both straight and gay, there seems to be an intense connection with degrading, which it doesn't again show you the relationship between the sub and the top. There's that's left out, isn't it? So it's this degrading thing. So again, a lot of people, especially I see a lot of teenagers and young men, and they've got real wrong misconceptions about sex already at the young age.
Yeah.
And so the question I wanted to ask is, in your opinion, do you feel that everyone can try this, or do you feel like there's a part of only certain people that can be into it?
It's for everybody
Yeah.
because it's a continuum. And for you, it might be going to the bar in Leather and having your place standing there just behind my left shoulder, where you're safe, you can be introduced to people, you can have some experiences, but there's no huge expectations. You don't have to be up on the cross on the stage being flogged with the floodlights on you. It's a continuum. So I always say, have a think about what it is that you think about when you're having a wank.
Don't get me started.
And you you can pop that up on your background there, Joey, so that we can all see that. But, but it's a continuum. You don't have, and if someone wants you to jump in at the deep end, they're not the person that you should be engaging with. The person that you should be engaging with is the person who wants to find out where you are today, where you think you might like to go, and see whether that's a journey that you can take at your speed. Because the journey's always got to be at the sub or the bottom speed.
Right. So, and I understand that and I love that. But how do you then? I'm speaking about a friend, by the way. How do you I feel like I've got a really serious job. I'm really busy. I feel like I'm really in control of everything because I've got so much happening. But yet, when it comes to this, I want to be the opposite. So, how does that power dynamic work from say, for me and the person I'm attracted to? Like, is it just a surrendering? If I'm say a successful busy person, how do I let go of that and become then totally submissive?
So, Joey, that's actually the side of things that I started on. My background is I'm an occupational therapist. I owned a practice doing return to work stuff and ergonomics for about 20 years. I was working 75, 80 hours a week. My business turnover was enormous. I had staff. I was running all around the countryside. My dominant at the time worked part-time in the university sector. Had one of those jobs that when you turned the computer off at the end of the day, the job was over. So it's not always, but often you see exactly that swap over of the power situation. My salary was multiple times higher than his. My responsibility level was multiple times higher than his. He flicked a switch in my brain that said, I don't want to do any of that stuff today. Today, I just want to be.
Did you want that as well, though? Did you want to go into a scene where, and then what about how you said you changed and you did your progression? How did you then turn that off to become what you are now, where you're more dominating rather than being passive?
People flick switches in your brain.
Yeah.
I met a fella, a hookup off an app. I expected to go to can I say sex on premises venue?
Of course you can.
No, nobody will know what it is. We organised a hookup at a sex on premises venue. He flicked that switch in my brain.
Right.
From the very first time that we met, I was sir and he was boy.
Right.
And it was just that perfect fit of our two personalities. And that's when my journey into it happened. I thought at the time, in sort of gay historical leather BDSM, there's a situation which we'll call hierarchical power exchange. So it's not uncommon for there to be, someone in the middle, I had my master. I was his collared property. Hierarchically, historically, not uncommon for me to have had a boy, and that's where I thought things would continue, and it stayed that way for about 12 or 18 months until my power exchange relationship up had to be dissolved, and now I almost entirely see myself on that dominant side of things.
So again, I'm learning a lot today. Thank you. But like, how do you learn that? Do you have to be part of going to like a pub or something, or you know what I mean? Or do you think you can learn that now, or be part of that online?
I think online's difficult because online is always sensationalist and it's a grab about something that you can come to.
Yeah, and you don't even know if that's real anyway, do you?
Yeah, I would, I do get people from time to time contact me who want to start exploring the scene, and particularly the gay male leather BDSM scene. And, I've got a handful of books that I'll point them towards, or a handful of authors who I think, some of whom were there in the day pre the HIV epidemic, because the leather and BDSM community lost a disproportionate number of people to HIV because of some of the practices that were common in that community.
Yeah.
So I'll point people back to authors who either wrote before the epidemic or lived through it and are able to report their experiences. So
yeah, and what I'll do is I'll talk to you offline, and I'll get a list of those books and I'll add them to this podcast. Okay. So I'm a therapist, and this is a mental health podcast. But the next question, I guess, leads into both our worlds. How do you navigate, or how do listeners organize boundaries in regards to the language that they want to use when they're in that situation? If they're learning, like, is that something that's taught, or are they able to understand it before? Like, what they want to do and not do.
Yep, consent is always key. I always say the first time someone contacts me, what would you never do? And unfortunately, when people's dicks are hard, it's, I'd do anything. I've got no limits, sir. Well, I like to chop boys' legs off. Would it be okay if you came around and I chopped your leg off?
Yeah,
just the one.
Do people ask for weird things?
People generally, in the first instance, people either don't know what it is that they want, or they think they need to offer me what I want.
Yeah.
What I want is for Joey to offer me what he's prepared to offer me today. Let me take that, and then the next time Joey comes back, Joey's going to offer me something different or something a little bit more. So it's really important to have a clear idea in your head about what your limits are. What are your soft limits? What are the things that you'd need to be encouraged and supported to be able to try? And what are your hard limits? What are the things that are completely off the table?
Yeah.
And there are some online surveys that you can use to start to generate your thinking in that sort of direction.
Yeah. I think that you said something earlier that ties into this, and that is a lot of people's first experience will be through media. So they might watch a movie or something, and it's all like, 50 Shades of Grey, for example, really threw that whole scene, and I get it for the I guess the straight community. But the thing is that a lot of people then have that misconception, and you're explaining it in a way that I guess we don't have access to. I feel like there's, even though you're mentioning books and all that, there doesn't seem to be much available reading material that say it, like, not articles in the paper or in a magazine, because it sort of does seem to be this sort of like it's in the corner over there. I mean, but when you go to Europe or America, it is a different scene, and I guess it's because of the population. Do you mind if I talk a little bit about maybe the darker side of the gay world, and that is, what do you feel has been the impact of ICE and like drug use with this scene?
Red button topic.
Again, you don't have to talk about it a lot. I'm just curious because we can't ignore it. I know it happens.
We can't. And I personally have, I've had two dynamics end specifically because of drug use. one person who just wasn't prepared to address their drug use to the point that I no longer felt safe, and so I had to close that dynamic down and move away.
Yeah.
The second person actually made a determination that they needed to get clean and sober, and to do that, they needed to move a long way away from where we were. And so that was another dynamic that I lost. There's huge issues around drug use in the gay community. We know that. From a BDSM perspective, that creates a massive impact on consent. I cannot have a consent discussion with you if you're high. I cannot be sure that what I'm getting is informed consent. Equally, if I come along and we're in a scene and we've had all the conversations when you're sober, I come along, we're in a scene, you've taken something before the scene, I can't be sure that the responses that I'm getting from you are real, because I don't know what impact the substance you've taken has on your capacity to give me feedback during the scene.
Yeah.
So,
is it a problem, you think? Is it big? Is it are you enormous?
Enormous.
Yeah.
I get people who contact me who want a scene, but will say, and I'm really clear that you need to be sober. But they will say, but I can't submit unless I'm.
I've heard that as well. And I interviewed a guy from the UK who actually came up with the term chemsex. And I asked him a question. I said, okay, so what do we do? How do we move on? And he said, well, every now and then in life, we experience something that we can never get rid of, which meaning it's this. And we have to learn to adapt. So do you think that there's a possibility for us as a gay community to actually step up and try and help those people rather than, I think we're not there yet, but, do you think that we can actually maybe help, or do you think it's too far gone? I know it's an opinion.
Can you reword the question for me?
Okay, I'll reword it. Do you think that because we're aware of what's going on in the scene with people using, do you feel like we have a responsibility to help?
My partner very smartly always says, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help anyone else. And so there are some people that I'm not equipped to help. The young man that moved away, I think I helped. I think our discussions post him moving was that our dynamic and our interactions were one of the things that enabled him to get to the point where he was able to take control of this situation and make some changes.
Sure.
But sometimes you've just got to walk away and say.
Well, I was going to say, I'm guessing not everyone is as amazing as you. There's going to be some people that are not going to. When you said the thing about how do I know to consent with someone, I thought, oh my God, this guy's so nice. But I'm sure other people won't even consider that.
I hear some horrible stories, and I don't know how graphic you want me to be, but I hear stories of people getting someone around, blasting them, and then just going to town.
Yeah.
And that happens, and that scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah. So it's all about education, really, because that's why I wanted you on, because you've made us, hopefully you're making people realize that doing this doesn't mean that you need to be in an altered state. It doesn't mean that you need to prepare your body to do stuff that is going to hurt. It's all about the feelings that go with the role playing and with the enjoyment and with the, like you're saying, like what is the person going to bring, rather than let's get off our heads and just do what you want.
And if we're going to do
that's not really it's not really BDSM, is it?
If we do this properly, you're going to be in an altered state when we're finished.
Exactly. It's like meditation.
You're going to be in subspace.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in top space. We're going to be able to connect, and we're going to be able to read each other, and we're going to be able to interact. But you're going to be so far away on the endorphins, and I'm going to be so far away on my connection with what I'm doing with and to you that, it's the cheapest high you're ever going to get.
Yeah, I love it. So if someone's listening and they're curious, what would be your suggestion on how they should start exploring that in regards to, say, the town that they live in or the city that they live in? Because this is a global podcast. So I know that some cities probably, like London, for example, you probably have access to so many. But what's your suggestion of how they should start?
I would always start with doing a bit of research, working out whether this might be for you, what sort of things you might be interested in, because that'll narrow down where you want to look. But places, there are some really good podcasts. What's the safe word? There's a podcast down out of Sydney called The Kink Closet, one out of Palm Springs called Sexual Heroes. You might want to listen to Joey's podcast. You might pick up a couple of things there as well. If you're in the gay male community, Recon, it's not just a hookup app. They also publish articles. They publish member profiles. How did you get to where you are? Why do you do that sick fuckery that you do? There's another international website called FetLife. That you can drill down to your own location, you can drill down to events, you can drill down to educational stuff. One of the absolutely fabulous things that came out of COVID was people putting stuff online. I had large periods of time during COVID where I couldn't work, and I was doing skill shares with Wicked Grounds, which is a education cafe in South of Market in San Francisco. I did skill shares with leather groups right across America. So there's that sort of stuff, and that's continuing.
I think COVID did a lot of. COVID was a good thing. I think it introduced a lot of changes in how we see things.
Communication, for being able to share information internationally.
And even I felt that 2020 was a year that a lot of people stepped out of their comfort zone and started trying things that they probably would never try. Because there's a bit of a surge with bisexuality and pansexuality, and it's become open, would you recommend that people go to their own sexual orientation as a group, or would you suggest that any kink leather group is you know what I mean? Like, that could be confusing for some people, and they join a group and it's all heterosexual. Like, what do you suggest?
My personal feeling is that there's places for single-sex events, single-sex groups. So gay men, lesbians, heterosexuals, to all have their own individual spaces. And when you're secure in those spaces, then you're able to venture out into the mixed spaces. Here in Melbourne now, we've only got mixed kink spaces. We don't have any gay male kink spaces left. We lost Club 80, is that an opportunity for you and I to open up a business? I don't know how many $1 million you've got, but I don't know.
So does that mean, so if there's no spaces, then are people doing it at home? Is that homes, dungeons, or studios becoming a new garage thing? Is it?
Well, I live in a 2-bedroom townhouse in Abbotsford, and the second bedroom is my office. So there's not really the opportunity here. I have a house up at Dalesford. I have a dungeon up there. I think people are doing things at home. There are a couple of pan spaces. There's a monthly party called Provocation, which runs in the city. There's an event space in the inner west called The Club. Provocation, I've certainly been to as a gay male. Gay males are certainly the minority, which is a bit odd for us because we're used to, when we're going out, being the majority. I've not been to The Club, but again, it's a pan space. They're running lots of educational stuff. I think as gay men in a BDSM space at the moment, we're going to have to get used to doing our play in spaces where there are people who don't look like us. And
maybe that it's interesting because you were saying that, and I'm thinking, the last few foursomes I've been to in San Francisco, I've noticed when I first went, it was just men, and then each time I've been to a few of them now. Each time I noticed that it was changing. The biggest change for me was when there was like prams everywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, so maybe do you think it's a good thing that we're integrating, or do you, in your own personal opinion, do you prefer it to be separate?
I want both. I want my space where I just see people that represent my gay male community. I don't want them all to be middle-aged and white. Right. I want to see people who don't look like me in that space, but behave like me.
Yeah.
And then I can then go out into spaces where I'm having interactions with different genders more comfortably. I think we need people, especially with BDSM stuff, people always feel like they need to be able to perform to a certain level, which is a load of rubbish. You only need to be able to perform to the level that you can perform to. And a good Dom only wants what you can give them.
Dom, it's good.
But then going out into those spaces where there's a small group of leather guys who we have a similar feeling, and we're actually planning a joint trip to one of these two pan events, so that we've got some safety in numbers.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing that I love is that, when I started working at the Lead and I was in that Nuggets bar and I was so petrified, and then I go and serve the men and they were so nice, and I'm thinking, God, it's just an image. And then another time I went to Amsterdam and I'm short, right? And this massive 6'7" guy came up to me at the bar and he goes, "Sir," and he called me sir. And I just found it to be funny. So it is all a illusion. We've got a bit over, which I love, but I want to ask you one final question.
Yep.
What would be a standard startup kit? What would you need to buy? What would you suggest that someone who's never done it before? What is the thing that you need to have in your kit?
If you're going to be a top or a bottom?
Well, let's do a bit of both. Like, for example, is rope something? Like, what would you suggest?
Look, I spent 5 years with a rope Dom. I can't tie my shoes. It's really not necessary. Starting kit, ball gag is always good.
Yeah.
Blindfold is always good. A hood of some description is good. I have leather bondage cuffs, ankles, and wrists. I can restrain you just as happily with those.
Yeah.
A good long roll of Glad wrap goes a long way.
Okay.
That's
cheap, isn't it? That's cheap. You can get that at the supermarket.
Box of clothes pegs doesn't cost very much.
I love that. Yeah.
You can.
What about the whip?
Floggers, yeah. But again, you've got to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Clothes pegs, you can't do too much damage to someone.
Are you sure? That it hurts. I was actually quite surprised how much pain there was when it was all your body.
Well, but after a while, I've never found they've hurt me when I put them on people.
Okay, yeah.
And they only hurt when you take them off.
Yeah.
But that hurt versus damage.
Yeah.
Clothespins hurt. If you hit someone wrong in the wrong place with an impact tool, you can do damage to internal.
Yeah. Is there I mean, I knew that there used to be, one of those places on Hoddle Street, they used to have classes. Is that still happening? Are there still lessons that people can learn this stuff?
It's not something we've had an awful lot in the last couple of years. The club, the place I mentioned in the Inner West in Melbourne, they're running some courses. Some are Wicked Grounds are running some via Zoom. The group that I'm involved with, the establishment, we are running skill shares that will be run on a monthly basis.
Is that face to face or online or?
Yep, they'll be held. Can I mention the business name?
Yes, of course.
They'll be held upstairs at Man House.
Cool. Anything that you want to mention, I want to promote. So we'll have a comprehensive list below so people can find stuff. Because otherwise, it doesn't really help talking about something that I don't know where to find it. Kevan, I could talk to you for hours, but we've gone into nearly an hour. So this is going to be a special sex episode.
I've got another 3 pages of notes here.
Can you sum it up in a final statement? What would be your final statement to our listeners?
Talk, find someone you can trust, set your limits, get out and have some fun.
Yeah. Beautiful. And how can are you available to be hired on the hourly basis? No.
Well, during COVID, when I couldn't work, my partner suggested that I go pro.
Yeah.
I haven't done that at this stage. I'd have to stop taking driver's licenses.
Well, during COVID, I went looking for a master through the pro avenue, and you know what? I only found females.
There are a couple of guys working at one establishment in Melbourne, but there aren't many.
Yeah, I think there was only one guy, but he wasn't from Melbourne. So it was just, I found that really sort of a bit, I was a bit shocked. I didn't,
Yeah.
maybe because I just didn't explore the dominatrix scene, but I was shocked that there was page after page.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it must be big business or big.
I think it's huge business. I think the issue is that as gay men, we can jump on any number of apps and we can find any number of things.
Yeah.
Whereas for a straight guy who wants to be dominated, harder to find, so therefore probably more likely to say, well, I'll just pay for it because that way I'll get what I want.
Yeah, I wanted to interview them. So someone introduced me to you. So it's when you don't know anything, it is a sort of like hard to navigate place. But once you find the opening, I guess everything then opens up.
That person should be able to lead you through and introduce you to other people who can fill in the blanks on the things that you don't know that you don't know. Because that's always the issue. We don't know what we don't know.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much. I could talk for hours on this. I've learned a lot and really enjoyed it. So I really appreciate your time. And so for everyone listening, we're going to have a special over the 2 podcast episodes of the week where we're going to talk to Kevan and we'll talk to another person who's going to talk about body image. So it's really exciting to get this topic out rather than it being a taboo topic. So thank you, Kevan, and thank you for everything you've taught us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, just be mindful the podcast is going to be out on Mondays and on Thursdays. So make sure you hit subscribe. Please, please, please. Otherwise, Sir Kevan will come and get you. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you get notified of all our podcasts. See you next time, guys. Bye.